This week, Pesach, we talked about one of the core parts of the Haggadah, the Psukim from Arami Oved Avi from Sefer Devarim that the Baal HaHaggadah brings to us towards the end of Magid.
And we focused on the Pasuk that describes how Am Yisrael were enslaved by Egypt. But surprisingly, it starts with saying, Vayareu otanu, they did bad to us. Then when we look at the Pasuk that the Baal HaGadah brings about the bad they did, he chooses a very interesting Pasuk to describe the evil they did. Not what we would expect.
Exactly. There's a lot to learn from that specific pasuk itself, from what does it mean, Vayareu otanu, what did they do to us, but also from the entire process that Paroh took Am Yisrael through in the beginning of Sefer Shemot. That's where Baal HaHaggadah takes us back to the beginning of Sefer Shemot. What exactly goes on over there when the Torah tells us, Vayakom melech chadash Mitzrayim, there's a new king to Mitzrayim. Make sure you take a look. Hope you enjoy it. Hope you have a good Seder and a lot to talk about. Happy Erev Pesach, a special midweek video for Pesach Yetz. And of course, this week, what I want to talk about is the Haggadah. The Haggadah is very, very long. Many of us, some of the parts we like, some of the parts we rush through, and we don't really pay attention to what it's saying. But actually, when you look in the Mishnayot and Psukim that tell us what we have to say on the Haggadah, one of the more core parts of the Haggadah are the Psukim from Parashat Ki Tavo, the Psukim of Arami Oved Avi, which is kind of at the end of Magid, and the part really that we kind of rush through because it's so many different psukim together. And what I want to talk about today is trying to understand a little bit what those psukim are about, because when you look at those just four psukim which are brought from Parashat Ki Tavo, Arami Oved Avi, you see that these four psukim each reflect a different time, a different period, a different stage in the process of Yetziat Mitzraym, starting with Am Yisrael going down to Mitzrayim, settling the land, and Paroh v'Rabu, and Am Yisrael becoming bigger and bigger in Mitzrayim itself, and then moving on to the Mitzrayim, the Egyptians enslaving Am Yisrael, forcing them into hard labor, the avodat parech in Mitzrayim, and then Am Yisrael reaching out to Hashem, crying out to Hashem, praying to Hashem to rescue them, and then the great redemption, the great rescue from Mitzrayim. Those are the four psukim in Parashat Ki Tavo in Arami Oved Avi, and then the Haggadah comes along and takes each word and expands on it with midrashim, with explanations what exactly that word actually means. And when you look at those psukim, there's many things to talk about, but I want to talk about the one pasuk that talks about the Egyptians enslaving Am Yisrael, the Shiabud Mitzrayim, the hard time that we had to go through in Mitzrayim, because over there the pasuk says Vayareu otanu HaMitzrayim, the Mitzrayim made us work hard. Not really sure what Vayareu means, but then the Haggadah explains that this relates to the pasuk in the beginning of Sefer Shemot that says what? That says that they made us work hard? No, it relates to the pasuk where Paroh tells his helpers, tells his advisors, I have a plan, I have a tactic to use. Let's outsmart these Israelites and make them work hard. And this is the Vayareu. This is what the Egyptians made us go through. This is the bad thing they made us go through. So obviously, first thing you have to ask is, really, this is what they made us go through? Where's taking all the boys and throwing them into the sea? Where is all the different terrible things that they made us do in Mitzrayim? Why is that not in the Vayareu? Why is that not part of the Yareu? So in order to understand this part of the Haggadah, this Pasuk, and really understand what this enslaving was about, what is exactly the Baal HaHaggadah telling us over here in this explanation of the Pasuk?
Yeah, if Vayareu is doing bad to us, I really can think of a lot worse things than, that discussion that Paroh's having with his people about us. So I think the Baal HaGadah, when it's adding that pasuk to Vayareu otanu, it's noticing interesting, because the words of the pasuk aren't Vayareu lanu, they did bad to us. If that was the words of the pasuk, then Vayareu lanu is they did bad to us. Now let's look for the worst things that they did to us. But the Baal HaGadah, with just one simple pasuk, just one pasuk he puts there together with Vayareu otanu, is actually teaching us something very important. What Paroh did first is not Vayareu lanu, to do bad to us. That happens later. The first thing he does is Vayareu otanu. Vayareu otanu means they turned us into bad. What does that mean, they turned us into bad? Explains the Baal HaGadah. Look at the first pasuk. Look how it all starts. It doesn't start by him doing evil. He first makes us evil. He first turns Am Yisrael, who knows they're going to fight us, they're going to destroy us, they're going to come against us. He first turns us into bad. Vayareu otanu is they made us bad. Think of who Am Yisrael was till that moment. Am Yisrael was Yosef. Yosef was almost the king of Egypt. He was the one who saved Egypt in its hardest time. You can think of how Am Yisrael, or the people, the family of Yosef, were seen in Mitzrayim till that point. They were loved, they were appreciated, they were seen highly. And what Paroh first does is he turns us into into bad. Vayareu otanu HaMitzrayim, and only then vaya'anunu vayitnu aleinu avodah kasha. And it seems this is a theme with all of our enemies, where they first take us and turn us into evil. Take the Nazis, for example, right? They start with all the propaganda, we're destroying the world, we're the evil of the world. They take the good things, the seemingly good things we bring into the world, the morality we bring, no, that's actually evil, it's destroying. It's all about first turning us into the devil, into vayareu otanu, and only the next step it becomes a lot easier to fight against us. But why is this so important? I mean, why is it so important what they think about us? It's like little kids saying, he said that and he said that, and the parent will always say, it doesn't matter what he thinks about you, it doesn't matter what he says about you. But we have a more serious story here. They tortured us, they killed us, they enslaved us. Let's focus on that. Why are we even talking about the fact that they said that we were bad? There was only a few words in all this story. Why are we focusing on how they demoralized us and what they thought about us before they did evil to us? If we want to focus on the evil, let's focus on the evil that they did to us. But maybe there's something much deeper here. Am Yisrael coming out of Egypt is not only about a suffering people, is not only about a nation of slaves becoming free and stepping out of Mitzrayim. Am Yisrael coming out of Mitzrayim is Am Yisrael being born. Am Yisrael, as we know from many Psukim and from Chazal, is born the moment we come out of Mitzrayim. That's when we become a nation, not just the people of Israel, not just the children of Yaakov. We become a nation through Yetziat Mitzraym. That's the birth of Am Yisrael. Pesach is the birth of Am Yisrael. And as the Navi says, part of the birth of Am Yisrael is Am zu yatzarti li tehilati esaperu. Hashem says, I've created this nation, and this nation will tell the story which reminds us of the story of Pesach. And this nation will tell the story of my glory. Am Yisrael is the story of HaKadosh Baruch. When the world sees Am Yisrael, when Am Yisrael is at a high, that's a Kiddush Hashem. When Am Yisrael is at a low and being crushed, that's a Chilul Hashem. Hashem's name is upon us, as it says in many other places in the Navi. Shem Hashem nikra alecha. It's upon you. So when you're being crushed, and also HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who you represent. Part of us being a nation is not just us being on our own and being able to do what we want and not being slaves. It's this mission we have in the world. It's the story that we need to tell. It's, by the way, the story that we tell even without telling a story. When the people of the world see Am Yisrael grow, see Am Yisrael come out of Mitzrayim, come to Eretz Yisrael, and when they see them today come back to Eretz Yisrael after an exile, that's a Kiddush Hashem. That's when the world sees, wow, look at the God of the Jewish people, look at HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and recognize his name. Therefore, the demoralizing of Am Yisrael, turning us into bad, vayareu otanu, is part of the story. Because when they turn us into bad, when they turn the messages we bring in the world into bad, that's when they're also turning HaKadosh Baruch Hu into bad. That's also the Chilul Hashem that comes with that. It's not only about us suffering, it's also about our name, which represents God's name, which is being pulled down. Vayareu otanu HaMitzrayim. That's the beginning of the process, maybe also the key to all of it. It's all about that. It's all about bringing Am Yisrael down, bringing that message, that story that we're supposed to bring to the world. And therefore on Pesach, when we come out of Mitzrayim, it's about telling that story. Not only our personal story, but the story we're supposed to tell throughout the generations, our mission in this world.
Exactly. Beautiful. And really, when you look at these Psukim, like I said, it's only 4 Psukim, but when the Haggadah takes this Pasuk of Vayareu otanu HaMitzrayim and it starts to explain each word, it refers to a different part of Psukim that we find at the beginning of Sefer Shemot, really the beginning of the Shiabud, right after the Torah describes how Am Yisrael are down in Egypt, Paroh vayishratzu vayirbu b'mod mod, Am Yisrael are growing in Egypt. Suddenly, Vayako melech chadash al Mitzrayim. This is the first step of this Vayareu. And really, when you think about Am Yisrael over there in Mitzrayim, like you said, which was probably very true, Am Yisrael were descendants of Yosef. Yosef was the one who saved the Mitzrayim. He's the one who made them the superpower that they became. He's the one who had all the nations around Mitzrayim 200 years ago come to Mitzrayim to look for food because of the famine. We can imagine how legendary this Yosef was. We know that when he died, they wanted to leave him in Mitzrayim and they wanted to worship him and turn him into a god because of that status, because of that level he managed to reach. So we can also imagine how his descendants, how his family was also treated back then in Mitzrayim. Am Yisrael, the Israelite, were treated probably very differently in a very respectful way. And when you think about what happened to the society over there in Mitzrayim, how did Paroh manage to play out his tactic? How did he manage to make his tactic work of Hava nitchakma lo, let's outsmart them? You really have to think, how did he manage to do that? How did he pull it off? How did he get all the Egyptians to turn on Am Yisrael, to turn on the Jews, to turn on the Israelites, who the whole purpose was to do good for them, to bring good into their land. How can suddenly now everybody turn against them? But if you look at the Psukim that the Baal HaGadah sends us to in the beginning of Sefer Shemot, from this Pasuk, from this Shiabud, from this Vayareh Otanu Mitzrayim, this Pasuk that explains the enslaving of Am Yisrael, if you look at those Psukim, you see the gradual process that the society in whole in Egypt are going through, starting with Vayako Melech Hadash al Mitzrayim. First of all, you have to have a new king who doesn't recognize the history. He doesn't recognize the history because that's an incredible important point, because you have in society different groups. Every society has different groups, and part of what holds society together is what these different groups went through together to get to where they are today. But if you want to have each group start fighting with each other, you erase that history behind them. You step up and erase that history, the bonding that these groups went together and what bonds them together, you erase it, you take it away. And now once you get rid of that, now you can emphasize that there are different groups here. Now you can really point out that these groups have nothing to do with each other because they have no history. There is no Yosef. The Yosef doesn't exist. What Yosef did for us isn't relevant. This is something else. Forget what we all went through together as people, as different people from different groups, but we went together. Look at what is going on today. We are different groups. We are not nothing alike each other. We have nothing in common with them. That's step one. After you get to that step, then you can start implementing your plan to create that wedge between the groups, to create the separation between the groups. Number one, by talking about the future and trying to implement these scary thoughts, frightening the different groups about each other, from each other, telling them that one day they will get up and rise on top of us, and using that in order to create today a separation between the different groups. And then once you created that in society, once you implemented this hatred in society between the different groups, the next step after that is to try to whitewash the Shiabut, to try to whitewash the enslaving, and slowly start enslaving them through different rules, like we saw back in Nazi Germany, different rules of you can't do this, you can't do that. Sarei Misim, the Torah calls them. It's ministers of taxes, just taxes. It's not really enslaving. We're not making them work hard. We're just boycotting several products that come from different areas in that land. It's not really racism. It's not really something against the people. It's not that I have something against that group. It's just that I have more taxes to put on them. I have different reasons not to buy their products. I don't like what they're doing. And again, masking this racism behind a beautiful mask of values and of moral, which I am better, and therefore it's only these little things that I'm doing. It's just tax ministers that are there to tell them to build these places. That's the only thing. We're not going to do any more than that. We're not even talking about anything else. We're just going to call to boycott this and boycott that. And then once you slowly created that separation through hatred, and then you also implemented these rules, then from there to create a real segregation, to create a real enslaving of the people and have one group treat each other in the nastiest and the most terrible way, then your road is already paved. You just have to add more work and slowly add more rules until you get to that place where Am Yisrael are a nation of slaves in Egypt, going from that point where they were in Eretz Goshen, the descendants of Yosef, the people that brought pride to the land of Egypt and turned them into a superpower, and now they are the slaves that are being slaughtered just for the blood from Paroh, like the Midrash tells us. Looking in the Psukim, this is what Baal HaGadah is telling us. This is what the Vayareu Otanu HaMitzrayim, like you said, taking us and turning us into a bad. That's how Paroh the king worked, and like you said, has happened so many times throughout history, taking us and turning us into the bad in society. Maybe this is what the Baal HaGadah is showing us over here in this one pasuk, Vayareu Otanu HaMitzrayim. He's explaining to us how this has worked throughout all the generations, time and time again, taking us and turning us into the bad of society, instead of showing who we are, that we actually bring good into the world. And we can't not relate, Baruch Hashem, to having Eretz Yisrael today, having our own state today, where we really can show to the world what good we bring into this world. This is our job over here, and this is the message that our generation, the unique message that our generation has for the world, to really show how much good we can bring into the world.
Yeah, exactly. And as you're saying, it's not only about the bad side, it's also about the good side. And I think this can explain something else about the story of Yetziat Mitzraym. Because in theory, if the whole point was just to get us out of there, then Kadosh Baruch Hu just could get us out of there. We didn't need the makot. We didn't need a lot of things. He could have just gotten us out of there. That was the point. But if we realize that the point is to change, is to shift from Vayareu Otanu HaMitzrayim, of Egypt seeing us negatively, of the world looking at us in a negative light, to the world looking up to the story of Am Yisrael. As we know, the story of Yetziat Mitzraym became the story of the world, the story of freedom, the story of people bring morality into this world, of not enslaving each other. For the world to look at that story that way, that's why we need all of Yetziat Mitzraym. If Yetziat Mitzraym was just us personally trying to get out of there, there's other easier ways. The story is not just us. As we know many times, and we've discussed in the past, the makot and the impact it has on both the Jews and the Egyptians and the world around, the people looking at what's happening, because the story is not just about suffering and getting out of the suffering, because the story both starts with Vayereu Otanu. Don't look for the problem when you're already slaves. That's when it's too late. The problem started a lot earlier, tells us Baal HaGadah. Hava nitchakma lo, before anything happened. That's where the problem starts. So also the solution at the end has to go back to that point, has to go back to how the world sees Am Yisrael and the impact we have on this world. And as you said, that's also why our mission goes beyond just being free, but also to be mamlechet kohanim vegoy kadosh, to be someone who brings good and light, ola goyim, onto the world and fulfills our mission of bringing good and revealing godliness in this world.
Beautiful, exactly. And like you mentioned, we've discussed in the past so many times Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim throughout Sefer Shemot and also on Pesach in the past 2 years. There's a lot of videos to look up on our channel, Talking Torah on YouTube, so make sure you go take a look. We discussed why do we have 10 plagues? Why do we need all the 10 makot? We discussed what exactly did they celebrate in Egypt that first Seder night. The first Seder night happened before they went out of Egypt. So what exactly did they celebrate if they didn't go out of Egypt yet? And many, many more videos where we discuss the different things that happened in Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, from Moshe Rabbeinu and his mateh and his staff. And of course, why are these the Psukim? Arami Oved Avi from Sefer Devarim. Why are these the Psukim? We've been in the HaGgadah. We discussed that too in Parashat Kitavo. And you can really talk all night long as you have to on Seder Night. Bill will have to end here. You can go check those videos out yourself on our channel on YouTube. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like it, comment below on YouTube. And of course, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. In the Mitzvah Hashem, next video will be on Parsha Shavua again. So Bezrat Hashem, we'll talk again next week.
Shkoyach, Chag Kasher V'Sameach.
Shkoyach to you, Chag Kasher V'Sameach to you, and to all of Am Yisrael.